You're listening to the Upland Social, a podcast dedicated to the bird hunting community. I'm your host, Ryan Linton, an artist, writer, and lover of all things dogs and birds. We'll gear up and hit the field with some of the most engaging and compelling voices on the bird hunting scene. Each week, we will hear from seasoned hunters, dog trainers, storytellers, wild game specialists, to everyday uplanders just like you and me. Their insights, experience, and stories will inspire and equip you to explore, conserve, and celebrate the wild places we all love. The landscape is truly limitless. So load up, drop the tailgate, and let's go. This is the Upland Social. Edgar Castillo is a retired law enforcement officer for 27 years, where he worked for a large Kansas City metropolitan agency. He also served in the U.S. Marines for a decade. Edgar was born in Guatemala, and upon arriving in the U.S., he discovered his affinity for wing shooting. His passion lies in the uplands, wherever the dirt roads take him. To hunting open fields, walking tree lines, and busting through plum thickets in a never-ending search for wild birds in wild places. Edgar has written for over 30 outlets, including a variety of publications, magazines, journals, e-magazines, websites, and blogs for both the U.S. and Europe. You can follow his adventures afield on Instagram at HuntBirdz. Edgar, it's great to have you today, man.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm really excited about this. So, we kind of hinted at it in the bio, but just tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're located at.
Yeah, of course. Like you said, my name's Edgar Castillo. I'm here in the Midwest, just outside of Kansas City. Retired 3.5 years ago as a law enforcement officer. Served in the Marine Corps. Bird hunted since I was about 10. Um, it got more intense in my later years and started outdoor riding 5 years ago to what I'm doing today in my free time.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, before I forget to say it, thank you for your service. Really, really means a lot and appreciate that. Um, since you are located in Kansas, and I know this is something that you and I talk about back and forth over text and whatnot, but tell us about prairie chickens right now on the lek and dancing and booming. I know you've viewed some of that here recently, so let's talk about that for a split second.
Oh yeah, definitely something amazing if you've never uh, been able to watch it, live, as opposed to watch it at some kind of documentary. But me and a buddy of mine have been doing this for maybe three years now. Basically, just driving around. We know where to go, obviously, but we found a few leks, and so we go there and park and get out. We've got access to a blind and just watch the prairie chickens, doing their thing, wooing the females. Um, Here in the springtime, watching them, fly out, fly in, and do their little dance and performance and booming. But it's been a spectacle.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is. It's something that I've only seen on video, and the ones that you've sent me, I'm really jealous of you getting to be there and I'm not, but it's something that I definitely got on my radar to go in the spring and see. The closest one that I actually have is it's only actually only about 2 hours away in Illinois. Um, they have a very small population of greater prairie chickens kinda down in southeast Illinois, and there's a couple leks there, where maybe, I don't know, 80 to 100 birds reside, and so they do blinds. Sometimes they didn't do a blind this year for some reason, and the weather too kinda put a kink in things this year for me being able to go to even see it just with binoculars from afar, but, something that's definitely on my list. I definitely wanna see that, so, um, yeah, man, so, you talked about getting into wing shooting, when you were a little kid, or at least doing it to some degree. What made you want to get into this lifestyle bird hunting where um, man, anybody that knows you knows this is what you're passionate about and what you love, and what you dedicate a lot of time to, not just in the fall pursuing these birds traveling all over North America, but also writing about them year round. And so, what what made you want to get into this?
Well, I have an easy answer, just like probably most kids or young men, young boys. My dad did it, when we came here to the US. Hunting was not something that we did in Central America. A neighbor of ours introduced my dad to hunting, duck hunting actually, and then that kind of morphed into bird hunting. And I wanted to emulate my dad, and so I just kind of followed him along in the field, in the woods. And as I grew older, I saw the impact it had on me, and then it really hit me hard when I came back from my first deployment in the Marine Corps. That's really when I realized this was gonna be something that I was gonna be doing on my own for the rest of my life, and for me, it was always a means to, um, separate myself from all the stuff that I was, you know, having to deal with and work, and then, probably 5 years before I retired is when, I would say the second phase kinda kicked in it just became more intensified, and that started me traveling throughout the US, chasing different types of birds, something that I never would have thought that I would have done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can completely agree, with that sentiment of how the uplands are just like an escape, and time slows down. Um, it's quite easy to detach, from the stressors of everyday life, so I totally get that, and, it really is like a refuge, I think, is how a lot of people would describe it, where it's like, when I go out here, all that matters is just walking this field or walking these woods or these hills and, chasing a dog around, and, that's all that matters in that moment, so I love that, man. Um, so you said you lived in the Kansas City area. When people think of Kansas City, they probably think of good barbecue, the Chiefs, maybe some Taylor Swift love interest perhaps, but, what I would say, what I think of is, it's the gateway to some pretty good bird hunting, and I think that you would probably agree with that too. So kinda tell us, like, what is the scene in Kansas? I know it's pretty broad. A lot of people just think maybe just flat, think Wizard of Oz kinda stuff, but, obviously you live there. I've been there plenty of times to hunt it. It is a very diverse landscape, once you begin to pop the hood on that place and, discover it. So tell us a little bit about that and, what all the state has to offer from an upland perspective.
Oh, yeah, of course, I think, I mean, obviously, Kansas is a well-known state, for, all types of hunting, whitetail, and obviously, upland, namely, pheasants and quail. Um, but it does offer quite a bit more, um, if you do a little bit of research and you're willing to drive and hoof it, as far as the landscape, um, oh, yeah, definitely not flat. I mean, if I remember right, I think I read somewhere not that long ago that ranking the states, I think Kansas, you would assume it would be like number 48, 49 as far as flatness, but it was actually like, I don't know, like kind of like a midway point. And then as you and I have been in the Flint Hills chasing prairie chickens, and um, it definitely has its terrain features um, that you know um, that push it, beyond the normal flatness what everyone thinks of. And with that, that allows the state to have just a diverse um, population of different species of upland birds. I mean, as I mentioned, pheasants and quail are probably the big two that everyone flocks to the state to. But you know, uh, I do a lot of snipe hunting, dove hunting. I duck hunt. Um, and then, there are the prairie chickens, the lesser and the greater. The lessers you cannot hunt. That stopped 10 years ago, I think. I used to hunt them in the Southwest when it was open, and then I talk a lot about it, and I get a lot of people asking me about the scale quail, which are in the extreme southwest corner. Just kind of got to know where they're at, and get after them. I mean, they act just like their little cousins down in the southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. They run, they don't hold, but if you can get into them, they could be really fun. It's just something not really known. And then, of course, woodcock. that I've been chasing the last 2 years. Um, Not limits, but, definitely keep your interest, during the, spring and fall migrations.
Yeah, it's, I think you explained the state, really well just then and how, we as people, we like to just to generalize stuff, right? And so we see something on TV about Kansas or how flat it may be or whatever, or just endless sunflower fields or whatever. And we just think, well, that just must be how the whole state is. But it truly is this diverse landscape that has a whole lot to offer. Not just from the bird perspective, but from a landscape perspective. You've got the Flint Hills. You've got, yeah, you do have those flat areas, those agriculturally friendly areas. You've got desert down in the Southwest. I mean, there is a whole lot to offer. Since you brought it up, let's talk about woodcock for a second, because I think when people think of Kansas, they definitely it's it may not even be the top 5 birds that come to mind, uh, for Kansas, and so, what, eh, I could be wrong, but I feel like there's probably a cutoff point where the migration corridor, it probably hugs more of that Missouri side of things, but what's been your experience with that?
Um, yeah, I've known about woodcock for a while. I think a lot of states obviously have a lot of, on their website in regards to the types of game that you can hunt. Um, and some of those are just kind of like unicorns. Um, but a few years ago, I wasn't too far from home, but we were actually duck hunting and we ended up flushing a woodcock. And that just kind of confirmed for me that they were here. And I had talked to some biologists and done my research and found snippets here and there that mostly duck hunters and some quail hunters had gotten into them sporadically right along the far eastern border of Kansas and Missouri. But it was really about 4 years ago. It was not Kansas, but a good friend of mine in southern Missouri invited me to go down and hunt woodcock, and that's something that you most people would think you'd have to go to Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, the East Coast. But I ended up going down there, been going down there for 5 years, and we're talking, 30, 40 flushes in the day, and
Mhm.
we're stopping hunting at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So really good numbers. You got to catch the migration perfectly. Um, and then that just kind of spilled over in here in Kansas the last 2 years. Another buddy of mine, we just happened to follow up on a tip and got into a lot of woodcock last spring on the reverse migration, and then that gave us enough intel where to go this past fall. Got into a few, so by no means you're looking at hordes of woodcock, but enough to keep it interesting and just something different to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that what you hit on just there too, they're going to try to find birds in the spring as they're working their way back up north. That can be very valuable intel, come fall. It does seem like it's a little bit different, of a habitat type where they need, like, an open space so they can display, with their sky dance. That's something that I just wrote about recently. But there's a lot of overlap in there too, I would imagine, of, you find a bird in the fall or sorry, in the spring,
Yeah,
and you're gonna find them in the fall there too, typically. But, yeah, it just goes to show that Kansas, much like every single state, it kinda kicks back on these stereotypes we try to overlay on them. And, you can find some woodcock, at least at times, in the state. And, because Eastern Kansas, it mimics a lot of, like, what Missouri looks like. And then gradually as you get out of the metropolitan area, as you get towards, like, Topeka and out that way, that's when it begins to kinda open up and have that more Western, feel, is how I would describe it. And so it makes it's to no surprise, that you're gonna find a few woodcock at times, there in that very far east side. So that's pretty cool, man. And, yeah, like I said, beautiful, diverse landscape. I tell people if they have never been to the Flint Hills, so, an hour or so outside of Kansas City, going west, man, they need to go. There's there's ground out there that has actually never even been plowed, it's never seen the till, and you can see, some of these places that are just like these ancient prairies, and they're beautiful places, and not only that, they've got prairie chickens on them, and there's some big tracks out there that are open to public hunting. There's not a ton of the especially the WEHAs, the walk and hunting access areas, like there are out west, in the western part of the state, but there are some, and they can be pretty sizable, and, the one and only prairie chicken I have killed has been on a WEHA, in the Flint Hills, and so it's a special place to me, man. So, okay, so you said you're from Guatemala originally. Just something that I was thinking about. If you know anything about it, what's the hunting scene like in Guatemala? Doesn't even necessarily have to be from a bird perspective, but just when it comes to opportunities and access and culture and just all those things compared to the U.S.
Oh, it's very much different. I mean, I couldn't tell you how it is today. I mean, I have an idea. I mean, obviously, I grew up there up until I was, oh, 10-year-old boy. I I never hunted. My dad used to duck hunt. Well, I think when he was little, but even growing up, and then we always once we came here to the U.S., we always went home because a majority of our family still lives there, and so I always knew that hunting, as far as a leisure activity, is just not something that's done by the locals. Um, the ones that those that did were for survival, sustenance. They went out and hunted um, the wild turkey and the Cody Mundies and just all these different types of exotic animals.
Hmm.
Um, but there was no regulation, no law. Well, maybe there were, but no one listened to them or followed them. My dad um, tells stories of untold numbers of certain species, spider monkeys. Because I remember hiking it, in the jungle outside the suburbs where we lived, um, to where numbers were just decimated. I'm guessing probably in the last 20, 30 years, um, 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 those laws have been more stringent, with people. I couldn't tell you how it is today. I'm sure that they saw that there was um a need to enforce those and
Mhm.
regulate it. Um, but yeah, I couldn't expand. I mean, I know they offer some guided turkey hunts in the northern Petén jungle and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just we're just so far removed, and um, yeah, that's about it. What I can tell you from what I know when I was a young kid.
Yeah, yeah. It's always interesting to hear, even the little bit that you just gave there, the difference in hunting, and kinda our posture towards it, where we have so much, still compared on a global scale, I would say that we have, one of the best, if not the best model for wildlife conservation and the
Oh
pursuit
yeah.
of the animals, hands down. And it's just so easy to take that for granted, that you've got 640 million acres of land that is yours, and you can go there, and you don't have to explain to anybody why you're there really. You are free to roam, so to speak, um and so it's always interesting. It kinda helps puts things in perspective, I think, to hear about it, in other places in the world. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
even with my family, we have them visit, several times a year, and they've been coming for ever since we've been here. But every time they come, especially in the fall, I always try to take them out when I'm out bird hunting, duck hunting, and several of them have been out with me multiple times, over a span of 25, 30 years, and they always ask the same questions is, "You can just walk on this land and hunt?" And, I tell them, "Yes, obviously, you've gotta follow the legal requirements and all the regulations and follow the rules and excuse me, the all the laws that are set in place, so you don't overkill, species, and they just don't understand that concept just because, hunting is just it's not a leisure activity for, the regular normal people, they're in all Central America,
Mhm.
I don't know anyone who just comes home from work and says, "Hey, I'm gonna go out and take a walk in the jungle to go shoot," whatever. It's just not done.
Yeah,
So we're very fortunate here in the US.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and, like I said, it it reminds you of how good we actually got it here, and, but no system's perfect, no state agency is perfect, not but, that's just the case, but, man, it's still really good, and, it kinda helps, I think, settle you back into, "Man, like, I've got it really good here," and, I'm thankful to be able to just be able to walk out my door and or at least, I mean, even drive 2 hours like I have to do a lot of times here in Indiana and, still go chase a bird somewhere, and, I've got free reign just to do that. So kinda switching gears here, what's like a struggle or a failure, if you wanna call it that, something that's been like a really valuable teacher to you, in the field, while you're hunting? What's just something that's like has really shaped you as a hunter, maybe that like, "Hey, I was really bad at this, but now I'm good at this," or something just significant where it really taught you something, in the field?
Oh gosh, I would say if I'd have to look back on it, I think the one thing that was kinda daunting for me was the land access, and not that there was, and you hit on this a little bit ago, not that there's not a lot of access here in Kansas. We have, 1.23 million acres of walk-in, and then another million acres of public land. Not private land open for public. I mean, you combine those two, you're looking at 2 million acres. And
Mhm.
that doesn't even include the federal land here in Kansas, but I think in the beginning, even with my dad, it was just, we were a needle in a haystack. We had to learn where to go, how to read the habitat, where to find the birds. I think that was our biggest obstacle when I was growing up, because my dad was learning, he didn't go all the time. Nah, we started going after college when I came back from the Marine Corps. Um, but that was a really big learning curve for us is just trying to figure out, where to go, why is that feel better than the one right across the road. I think that would probably be the biggest one. And then, as I grew in experience, um, that my knowledge increased obviously, but yeah, I think I would say that. And I bet you my dad would probably say the same thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too, especially once you get first started into it. I mean, it can feel like such a high wall and a barrier, to, "Man, I have no idea what I'm doing, I have no idea where to go."
Yep.
Um, but something that I, kinda live by is that your confidence never precedes, like, your actions, and so you just have to get out and go, and you're going to quote unquote "fail." You're gonna have days where you don't shoot birds, you don't see birds, and man, that's all just part of it. And it makes those moments a lot sweeter when you do, finally put one up, or you're able to read the habitat, and then just kinda in time, like, you're able to dissect and assess a place and be like, "Yeah, you know, there may be a bird here, but I don't think so just because the conditions don't line up." And then you kinda I don't know if you agree with this, but there a lot of times, like, you look at a place and you just kinda begin to gain this sixth sense of, yeah, that if they're gonna be here, they're gonna be right there, and that's a little bit different with every species type, I think, um but yeah, you get more confident and that barrier, that high wall begins to erode and you're able to see over it a little bit more. as the days pass and as you just spend time out in the field. Um, and I think a temptation of ours is because we have so much information at our fingertips where we want to research and try to do so much front loading at the expense of just getting out and going. Um, and that's still gonna always just be your best teacher. And that you can't replace that time in the field. I totally get that. Because I didn't start doing this till aggressively till like 2020, pursuing birds. Um, and that was without a dog too. And just in time, you just get more confident. Like it's just this thing that can't be explained, but time will just be really good to you. If you just get out and go, and keep after it. So, yeah, man, thanks for sharing that. Um, so kind of on the topic of a dog, I know that. Correct me if I'm wrong. You don't have a dog, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I did that. We did have bird dogs when I was growing up until, I even got older. We had, Brittany's and a lab.
Yeah, cool. Brittany, it's a great choice. It's what I have as well, and labs are great too, but yeah, love my little Brittany. Um, and, so, something that kinda came to me here while we were talking is you obviously are hunting with other people's dogs, um, you know, for the most part, and so, um, as owners and as handlers, we learn how to read our dogs. We can tell when they're getting birdie. We can tell we just have this kind of unspoken language that as you spend time in the field with your dog a lot, you can read that dog really well. Um, what is man, like what's like something like you've learned by not having your own dog for a while, and is there things that you picked on up as not the handler itself, but you're still hunting with these other people's dogs and things that you've learned how to kinda use each person's dog to your advantage while you're out in the field with them, if that makes sense?
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, but, I think we've talked about this, and I think most people kinda know that either know me or have been following me for a while, but, I hunt with, 4, 5 guys, that are in our little core group with 1 or 2 other guys that kinda fill in spaces, but that core group, we've been hunting together for, I don't know, 10 years, um, and, I we've gone, obviously all over Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, we've gone to, uh, Montana, Arizona, Wyoming together, the North Woods, so I know, these guys, these guys are my best friends, and, so I've kinda grown up with their dogs and, you know, with the amount of time that I spend with them, especially on extended trips, um, um, I've gotten to know, how their dogs work and what to expect from their dogs, how what they'll do, how they'll work a certain area, um, and I can read them pretty good, so that's definitely been valuable, obviously, when I get with someone that I don't know, and I don't never hunted behind their dog on, other than, obvious things, getting birdie, uh, their tails wagging and they've shifted from the way, they're going super fast to more of a methodical, route. Yeah, definitely those things like that have come into play. Um, I will tell you a story. A really good friend of mine had a Vizsla, and, a lot of people for a long time thought that Staley, the Vizsla, was mine, just because every time people saw me with the dog, naturally assumed it was mine, but it was actually a buddy of mine. He just was didn't have a whole lot of time to take Staley out, so I would take her out, take her overnight. We went into different states, and I was just with her so much, that I'd go and pick her up, that I gave her command, she listened to me, she was excited when I pulled into the driveway, she had her head up on my shoulder as we drove, and I mean, you could really see that bond, and, unfortunately, she passed away 6 years ago, and that was really hard, even though she was not my dog, but I had spent so many years with her, but, and I had her probably a couple times a week, especially, during the fall, um, on extended trips, so I really got close to Staley and, learned, her mannerisms in the field and how she works certain areas, of habitat, but yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's no, that's a beautiful story, and, that bond between man and dog, even if you aren't the firsthand owner, that's still, you feel that, right? As you took her to all these places and hunted with her. Um, and I think it's worth saying too that many people think that to get into bird hunting, you have to have a dog. And I think you are a prime example that that's just simply not the case. Um, there are times where it's definitely advantageous just to you to be like, hey, I'm just gonna get in the car and go and throw the dog in the kennel and we're gonna hit the field and yeah, I mean, there's definitely some advantage to that to having your own dog, but you don't have to. I hunted you know, without one first, just to hopefully find a few coveys of quail around here where I had a little bit of an edge so that when I did get a dog, um, I kind of knew like, a good few places to start. But you're a great example, like I said, that you do not have to have a dog. All you need is, get a good pair of boots. I mean, shoot, if you're in the Flint Hills of Kansas, tennis shoes will work for the most part. Um, and a box of shells, your license, and you're off to the races, and so don't let that
Yep.
stop you. Most people that get into this, they they do it for the dogs, is what a lot of people would tell you, and I totally get that. But it by no means do you have to have it, you can still pursue and appreciate these birds, bring some home, um, and all without a dog. So, uh, don't let that, listener, don't let that stop you, from getting into this lifestyle. It's a good thing to get into, if you have that desire, and, don't let that be a barrier to you. Man, I wanna talk about ptarmigan, because that is something that is such a unique pursuit. If anybody doesn't know, they live in some of the most unreachable places on Earth, above tree line, way up on top of mountains. Um, it's not just like you can walk out your door and like just start hunting. It is a lot of effort on the front end before you ever even get to these birds. Not a whole lot of information out there on them. In general, not a whole lot of videos of people going to pursue them. But I know that you've done that, in Alaska the last couple years, and I think you've done it in Colorado as well, am I right?
Yep,
Yeah,
I have.
so let's just talk about that, anything that you wanna share, I think, because we're so, at least I am, just so ignorant over the topic, but it's something that I definitely have on my list to do is go chase, uh, North America's smallest grouse, in the highest places, and so I would, yeah, I'm all ears, man.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do, and the guys that I hunt with, we were always when we started this, and Wyoming, was the starting off point for us. Um, we decided, we're going to be traveling to go and chase all these different birds. I mean, we love Kansas and Missouri, but we found that it was actually not really that hard, um, to go outside your state, and go chase all these birds that you just read about, or and these bucket list birds. So, couple years after our Wyoming, we every year we were doing different places, chasing different birds, and through social media, a couple guys that had read some of my articles, we started communicating, and one thing led to another. That invited me out to Colorado to go hunt, and I wasn't able to take him up on it until the following year, and then me and my buddy Dan and his son, drove out to Colorado, met up at a reservoir with these guys. Um, uh, really good guys. We clicked. We were all on the same page as far as you know, w- as far as like our lifestyle and stuff like that. So it was really easy. And then so they kind of took us out. You know, we got on sage grouse. Colorado has a 2 day sage grouse. We got into sharp tails. We did some snipe hunting. Um, but the ultimate goal at the end of the trip was ptarmigan. Um, and we're the type, you know, if we get into them, great. If not, you know, the chase and the traveling part to get to there is just as fun for us as getting a bird. Fortunately for us, you know, we were able to get into some ptarmigan, but yeah, we camped at, I think if I remember right, like around 10,000 feet. Um, we had a day and a half window. Um, um, Drove in a little Toyota Tacoma truck with all our gear and dogs another mile or so up. I think we stopped at, I don't know, maybe 12,000 feet, and then from there, we, um, we hiked up, you know, higher to where the ptarmigan, um, were at, and the guy, Dennis who had taken us, had been hunting ptarmigan there for years, so, you know, he knew the area, he knew the backcountry, his knowledge and expertise obviously played a large part in our success, but, yeah, we climbed up there with oxygen,
Hmm.
at his, suggestion, and we split up, and, I just happened to be on the opposite side of the mountain, um, on the other side of a lake, but Dan and Dennis were able to get into some ptarmigan, and I think we shot 5 or 6, um, but, yeah, I mean, it was an experience, and then a little bit different than the Alaskan ptarmigan, was more bushwhacking, but, yeah, definitely something if you're wanting to do, you know, do your research, um, reach out, network, and it's a very doable trip. You know, you gotta be in a little bit of good shape or at least condition yourself, um, so you can actually, you know, get into the country where they're at, which is high and pretty rough, or it can be.
Yeah. Yeah, so you camped at 10,000 feet, and then you drove up another mile, and then, like, about how many miles, or what was the distance of, like, the actual more hiking that you had to get to from, like, where you
Um
dropped the tailgate at?
I think we dropped the tailgate at around 12,
Okay.
and then we hiked up, and I remember taking a break. I've got, you know, some pretty cool photos, in a little, saddle, and I think we were at, like, 12.7, and then we crossed over and dropped down into a lake, a high-bound lake, and then we split up and I know Dennis and Dan were a little bit higher than I was, and I think they were like at 13. I think they were pushing close to 14. And then I was on the other side. I had flushed a couple, and I think I was, I don't know, maybe 700 feet below them on
Mm,
the opposite side of the mountain range.
yeah.
But yeah, I know those guys, when seeing them just specks on top of the mountain, I think they were like darn near close to 14,000 feet.
Yeah. Just just scraping the sky, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's up there, and, the fact that, your local guy advised you to bring oxygen, I mean, that tells you enough right there that it's not
Oh,
for the faint
yeah.
of heart, and, it's, the adventure's all a piece of that, you know? It seems like the videos that I've watched that the birds, they're pretty, they'll hold quite tightly for a dog, because I think camouflage is really much like a woodcock, in the timber. They, in the summertime, they're turning gray and brown and kind of these real mottled colors to emulate rocks, and then in the wintertime, they turned completely white almost except for, like, their eyes, beak, and toes. Um, and so the camouflage is really their tactic. It's not so much, running all day like a pheasant might. So, um Would you say I mean, would you agree with that? Was that your guys' experience where you were able to get pretty
Oh,
darn close to these
oh yeah.
birds?
Yeah, the birds that they shot, were, they were obviously, changing, but, the backdrop, even on my side and where they were at, I mean, it was all very, very rocky, we were told that, they could be pretty much anywhere, um, but, where they got into them, it was just yeah, Dan described it kinda like the moon
Mm,
surface.
yeah.
There were, hold very well, you gotta watch the dogs. The ones that they shot, they didn't wanna the dogs to take off, going over the side of a mountain cliff, trying to retrieve the birds, and they're also, very dim-witted. Uh, Dennis, our host and guide, um, had told us stories, um, of trying to get the birds to fly and throwing rocks, and where the rock would bounce off the ground and hit one of the ptarmigan in the noggin, and it fell over dead, and I even talked to other guys that confirmed that, and so, and if I remember right, I think when Dennis and Dan got into the birds, they had flushed a covey. I remember seeing the white against the blue sky where I was at on the opposite side, and hearing the echo of the shots, but, um, when we got back down, they were telling me that that first initial flush, there was another group 20 yards away, and they just went about their business, I mean,
Hmm.
as you know, if you did that with a covey of quail or pheasant or, any other type of game bird, those other birds would have hightailed it out of there.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's, and I'm sure people could listen to that and be like, "Well, that that's a bird that's not even worth pursuing." But it's all about how you define it. You gotta think these birds, they do not see people. They do not see dogs, on a regular basis like, a pheasant in Iowa would. And so they're just not attuned, to evading. They don't even see us as a threat, and so, um if I ever get to do it, and like I said, I hope I do, I'm sure I'll probably have to combat those thoughts a little bit too and just be like, "Hey, this is just you gotta remember this is all adventure too," I mean, just the
yeah.
everything you had to do to even get up here, in such a place of solitude, is worth the price of admission itself, and so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, to kinda go back on it, I think we started learning, we had to modify our gear and, we used trekking poles to get up there and, when we were getting out of the truck, making sure we had, food, water, because especially Dennis who said that, if the weather came in, we would have to get off the mountain quick,
Mhm.
because we didn't wanna get caught up
Right.
there, and then the notion came into play that if we did get caught up there, we better make sure that we had the proper gear, um, if we had to wait something out. And
Yep.
that spilled over into my Alaska trip when I went, for the first time, a couple years ago. Same thing, I wasn't in elevation, I think I was at like 6,000 feet, but it was the bushwhacking, trekking poles, and then when we got deep into the backcountry for the willow ptarmigan, um, you know, having to deal with all uh, that type of habitat and brush busting, and then they've got the rock and the whitetail, which you've got to go higher, um, and even more, more perilous, um, terrain and habitat to get to those. Not necessarily elevation, but again, just the type of landscape that you're going to be traversing to get to where they're at all comes into play.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Um, it touching on Alaska, it sounds like you were probably at some point, in grizzly country, because I know that that's pretty pervasive up there, where, you're probably never far from a bear. Um, at least that's the way it feels to me as someone from Indiana that's never been there before. Um, is that something that, like, you had to be quite mindful of, and be prepared with, like, bear spray and, I'm sure you guys were, you know, packing as well. Was that a reality, at least, like, kinda down lower in the bushwhacking kinda stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely. My buddy that invited me up there, that was one of the first things, I hunted spruce grass and ptarmigan. The times that I've gone there, that's what we've been after, and didn't matter whether we were, for spruce grass or ptarmigan, it was a very real, um that the possibility of running into a moose, black bear, and grizzly bear was high on the list.
Mhm.
Um, my buddy Jay had said, um, "Hey, Edgar, I know your background, your experience level, but Alaska's a whole different beast." I, 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 kn- I knew that, but it just didn't really set in until I was there bushwhacking, not knowing what was in front of me as I walked over, you know, bear tracks, bear scat, moose scat, um, and then seeing a mama grizz and a couple of cubs high up on a mountainside, foraging and feeding, a mile away from our camp that we had set up in tents and
Mm.
hearing, the crunch of sticks overnight. It And then, seeing bear tracks in some soil that I had just crossed over a creek that wasn't there 30, 45 minutes ago,
Yeah.
chasing willow ptarmigan. So it was a very real experience, unnerving, just definitely had your head on the swivel. He said, wherever you go outside of camp or even in camp, we all had sidearms as well as our shotguns. And we had dogs. So, obviously they would indicate, some type of presence if there
Mhm.
was one. But yeah, just s- a weird feeling just hiking and hunting in Alaska, definitely.
Yeah. I've heard Steven Rinella say before from Meat Eater that, he's from Michigan, he lives in Montana now, um, but he hunts Alaska a lot, and he says, "When I hunt Alaska, I always just feel like I just got off of a bull." And, I've never been there before, but I have to imagine that there's probably a lot of people that can agree with that sentiment because it just seems like it's like you described, it's a whole 'nother level of wild, compared to, most places that you can go to down here. Um, and yeah, so, I mean, it should be cause for proper preparation, to be I'm not saying you should be scared, but whatever's like the lower, the level below scared, that's probably what you should be, where your head's just like you said on a swivel, and you are aware at all times. And still quite uncommon, but it's not impossible. As we're kind of circling, kind of landing the plane here a little bit, I do want to talk about your writing. Um, I know that's something in just the last 5 or so years, you've been doing aggressively at least. Tell us a little bit about that. I would say that I describe to people that you are my mentor when it comes to outdoor riding as I've been getting into this, recently. And so, man, I wanna make sure to touch on that. And so, what got you into that? What do you love about it? What's your process look like? Anything that you wanna, describe about that?
Yeah. So I think most people that think about outdoor riding, I think I fell into the same dream. When I was a little kid, um, flipping through magazines, telling myself, boy, I'd love to do this. And I think that lay dormant for the majority of my life. And it's just something that was unattainable. Well, you know, by accident 5 years ago ish. I wrote a review for a online magazine. They're no longer around, but got a lot of response, positive feedback. They asked me to do 2 more. That led me to Project Upland and AJ when they were coming on online and starting that campaign and their magazine, and I ended up writing quite a bit, actually a lot for them as well as for their print magazine. But that 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 was really the the time when the door opened and all these opportunities, were presented and, just something I never thought about. I always wanted to do just but like I said, just thought it was just something that was just unreachable, and so I just kinda taught myself everything I could about outdoor riding, and I just kinda do it my own way, and it's worked for me, and, I enjoy telling my story, even though I still to this day don't think that I have an interesting, um, story or even anything, of interest to share, but, um, I continue to get good feedback, so I'm gonna keep on doing it, and, I like helping other people get into it, and that's the position that, I'm in now is I'm able to write about wing shooting when it's not the season. I'm reliving those moments and those experiences that I'm sharing with friends and strangers that I meet in the field, and that's what I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's, um, you talk about and I've heard you say that before that you don't think your story is really interesting, but once again, I'm gonna kick back on that because I think you have a wildly interesting story of, kid from Guatemala moved here. You've had this kinda ember that you've carried, so to speak, for writing for your majority of your life, but you never knew how to express it. And then, what what felt maybe just kinda like a trivial random, um thing for you 5 years ago to write a review, for this magazine, man, it's turned into, something that you're writing all the time now, and just like I read in your bio, you've been able to publish in 30 plus outlets, um, and it's just cool to see how, that's been able to really flourish into something, and so, and it's given, like, encouragement to me too because, I didn't it's not like I'm an English major or went into journalism or, anything like that, but I've always had a really, strong desire. I love communicating information, hopefully in a well-written or well-spoken way, to people about something that I'm passionate about. And obviously the topic here is hunting and the outdoors and conservation and the uplands and everything in between. Um, yeah, so it's just and like you said, it's a great way to almost not exactly, but to almost, at least in our minds, to kinda feel like you're hunting still when hunting season isn't going on, just because you're thinking about, that day, whatever you're writing about, the way, that the sun was hitting the grass or, you can almost, place yourself still with all the sights and the sounds and the textures and, how that bird felt like when it got up right at your feet or whatever. And, that's what I've noticed lately is it's like, wow, I kinda feel like I get to go hunting still, even though, and I don't wanna dismiss because I know you know this too, it's still, um, it's still kind of a grind, like, you gotta sit down, you gotta write, sometimes you write not great stuff, and, I'd say a lot of times it's kinda wading through a lot of the just mediocre stuff to get to the really good stuff of what you're trying to say, um and being able to take feedback, and whether that's feedback that you wanna hear or feedback that you don't wanna hear. So I definitely don't want to minimize any of that, but it really is if someone's wired that way, it's a really good way to express, your love, for the outdoors, even when season's not going on. So, man, yeah, love that. It's awesome. Um, yeah, so what's, yeah, this is something that, I'm sure this question will change as we kinda come to a close here, but a couple questions I wanna ask guests. What's a book podcast or a video that's been super helpful to you as a hunter and as an outdoorsman? Um, just something that's really impacted you. Because we're in a day and age where there's so many podcasts, right? There's so many things that you can read. There's so many videos that you can watch on YouTube about bird hunting. And what's something that's been like really beneficial to you, or just something that's impacted you, or just maybe just even just fall in love with this lifestyle just a little bit more.
Excellent question. I would say, I'm gonna give you 2 answers. I would say, first, the book is, I read it, a few years ago, right when I started writing, and it impacted me as a hunter as well as a writer, and it's a portion of a book. You can get this part of the book by itself. You don't have to get the entire book, but it's, Teddy Roosevelt's, Tales of a Ranch Hand,
Hmm.
and pretty much, um, he shows us experiences, in the West, Montana, Wyoming, um, and obviously he is known as a hunter and outdoorsman, but he was also quite a wing shooter.
Hmm.
It was more, for the pat, um, but nonetheless, in the book, he talks about, in detail, um, hunting sage grouse, sharptails, and various types of prairie grouse. And so when I read that, it was right before we went to Wyoming. It really made me made my eyes just kind of see that there is, this wildness out there, and that through a little bit of coordinating with, friends and doing your research, that those type of trips still exist, adventure. So that book really helped catapult me into traveling and trying to chase those dreams, um, um, without having to spend a whole lot of money. Very attainable.
Mhm.
Just depends on how comfortable you want to be. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but but as far as the book, that was probably one of the most impactful. Now, you also mentioned podcasts. Um, so my answer for that one is, when I started writing, um, I came across a podcast. They actually, Mr. David, reached out to me, and I've been a guest on his podcast twice. But before that, I had listened to it, and I was just totally enamored by, his voice, and just the type of people he had on his podcast, which were all writers and photographers and art, different types of outdoor media artists. Um, and it's, the Wild Huntsman podcast. And if you're kind of young, but you may know who I'm talking about, but the gentleman, the famous artist with the big, uh, hair. He was a painter. He had very soft-spoken voice, very soothing. Well, David, Lemire, has that type of voice. You can just kinda listen to him, and not that it's boring, but he just kinda puts you into that state of mind of restful bliss. And,
Mhm.
his podcast, just he had just a variety of guests on there talking about how they got started writing, and authors and photographers, and when I listened to that series of podcasts, it just it lit more of a fire underneath me, saying, "You know what? I can do this. I enjoy doing this." And it just really was a really sort of like a compass for me to continue, um, my writing.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. I think the guy you're talking about too is, Bob Ross. Is that who you're describing? The
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah.
He'd always, in a very calm, soothing voice, talk about happy trees. Um, Yeah, so I know what you mean, man, and that's, no, it's a great story, and, there's definitely people out there that have that way with their voice, which is like, "Hey, just I just want you just to just keep talking and say stuff because making me feel really good right now." But, man, I feel like we all have, even if it's like it doesn't have to be the pursuit of hunting, but just things that shape us and mold us that we see someone else, um, excelling with something, or has really made an impact in us, whether it's something that we've read, um, of course, like in real life with people, our family and our friends, that show us things about the outdoors. But I do think there's something to be said too about, um, someone that just writes in a certain way that makes you feel a certain way, and then you wanna turn around and help people feel that way about the uplands too, because it's like something that they already know, but they don't know how to they may not be able to articulate it in such a way, or maybe it's just the way that, someone puts together, a really beautiful, moving video. I think about Project Upland, they have tons of those, right? Like, where they do these really dramatized videos, kinda, like, really romanticize the uplands, or it may be something that's a little more lighthearted and fun, of a video too, um, or just a podcast, that you just really enjoy, and it's informative and, but it's entertaining at the same time. Man, it's just yeah, I think we all can relate to that and have those things that have influenced us. Um, Man, got one more question for you. Thanks for being on today. But my last question is, what's one place that you haven't followed a dog yet, that you want to, and why?
Ooh, I would say I'm gonna give you 2 answers. The Pacific Northwest, which I am going to later this year, hopefully, if everything pans out. I will, meet up with a buddy at his, invite, and I will be chasing, chukar and valley quail and a couple other birds. I think we're gonna start out in Idaho and then move over into, Oregon, Washington, one of those. So the Pacific Northwest, uh, and I've not gone to the East Coast, uh, for anything, which again, I think got something in the works, more of a duck hunt, um, for next year because their season stays open really late,
Hmm.
lot longer than I thought, and, expanding my, season because I run usually August if I go to Alaska to, February if I head to the Southwest, but, yeah, they're open till, like, late February, March,
Hmm.
and they're shooting a lot of wood ducks, so I would say the Bis the Pacific Northwest and East Coast are, New England area, I like to go there and chase some birds.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely the Pacific Northwest definitely draws me too. We went there a couple summers ago, my wife and I, for vacation, like, to the Seattle area and to the Olympic Peninsula. Um, and, I know that mountain quail, they've definitely gained some popularity, where they've been highlighted the last couple years, and I think that'd be cool, or even just chasing, like, rough grouse up in that area, or something, to that degree, but, man, there's a lot of places out there, um, that a person can go and, definitely have their enchantment about them, so, man, Edgar, this has been great. Wanna thank you for hopping on here today and joining me, man. It's been a lot of fun.
No, likewise. Thank you very much for having me on as a guest, and hopefully, my story, um, is inspiring. And if there's anyone out there that has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And those that know me, I'm an open book, and I'd you know love to help anyone. Whether chase birds here in the Midwest or if they have anything about writing.
Yeah, and I'll echo that too because, it was just a few years ago, I reached out to Edgar on Instagram, um, at Birdz is his Instagram handle, and that's with a Z on the end, not an S, and just asked him was picking his brain about prairie chickens, in the Flint Hills, and that's what's just kinda struck up this friendship over the last few years. We've hunted together and, spent time at Pheasant Fest together this year in Kansas City, and talk a lot about riding, just kind of back and forth about this and that. Yes, he is a highly generous person that is not greedy at all when it comes to helping other riders get started and to experience some success as well. So, Edgar, I want to thank you for joining us today on the Upland Social Podcast. Hopefully, we can get together this fall and chase some chickens around. It'd be fun.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later. Thank you for listening to the Upland Social, an extension of the Hunting Effect Podcast Network. Recording and editing of this podcast, plus intro and outro music, was performed by me, Ryan Linton. My aim is that through this episode, you are more equipped and inspired to explore, conserve, and celebrate the upland hunting lifestyle and the beautiful places it takes us. Until next time, whether it's right here or out in the field, we'll talk soon.